Hello and welcome to my new channel. I will write a prize on a question in physics, mathematics, and astronomy, string theory, thermodynamics, and so on. This theory would be under other circumstances also be solvable with other disciplines of physics, but I think only physics can solve it on a theoretical level right now because of the handling and conceptualization of the mathematics. But um, the other point, which is also important there to manifest back at, is that the sciences
Hol die Scheiße aus dem Darm, immer noch bei den Hunden, lange in den Parks, immer.
um, so some type of science became this way because we survived some kind of catastrophes this way in Europe, and we became the colonizational power because of military. And the interesting part is, yes, countries have become independent after colonization, but only now the global south has won again after colonization, and the first country to break through while the south was clearly winning was Syria. I mean, now they have a puppet, I think he will be gone, but Syria is the first country to be liberated from colonialism in the whole world. This is the first place where the Global South has something to say, but the Global South treats Syria as an independent entity with human rights and basics and courage and leadership, and they don't see them as a colonial threat. I mean, they wouldn't invest in them, they would rather leave the people of the ruins, not the Bedouins, the people of the ruins rule their realm and invest all their money and steal into the roll rates and fabrics and so on into Syria. But they would that govern themselves. It's a tragic. I mean, you as a Chinese cannot govern that country with mental health requirements. So it's clear that Syria will become the first country in the scheme of the global south that has been dominating the world for 20 years by now. For 20 years by now, the global south is dominating the world. Now, Syria breaks free from global south. Muslims were the first to, Muslims were the last to be colonized and the first to break through. This is really interesting. And the colonization happened because of military abundance in the late Americans but early Europeans. This means, in conclusion, for understanding in this perspective, that the immaterial sources of Islamic teaching have developed upon the local residents to get up credibility in their understanding of colonial opposition and force. And so to say, as I'm also more general because I'm doing something else, sometimes you have to speak very general to a general crowd. If someone, for example, other example, if someone is questioning your remarks on something like physics, then you would like to do that. Um, so it was a long pre-long, so it can serve also as a speech at the Nobel. So basically, I am promising to solve this equation that if you solve this equation, you have this theory of everything, you know, and then you can experimentally see what theory of everything means. But this is really a theory of everything. If there's something like a theory of everything, it's something similar to that. But there's definitely something like a theory of everything, and with my theory of everything, you can build experimental devices to prove the theory of everything. We can make experimental measurements and data selections to get the information that this theory is right and predict more. I have things they're predicting. And I think physicists will be the main pillar of recognizing this theory. After it's been solved in physics, it's generally applicable for all kinds of systems. That's why maybe for some reason I also wrote down the psychological components. As you can see, everything is atheistic. On the right side, you see words from the Quran. But I haven't wrote the details, they belong to these categories. So we have multiple time scales, as you can see. And these time scales are wonderfully drawn in different colors in this image. We have one time scale from 10 to 1 and 10 to 19, and from green to 9 and from red to green. So imagination is ethereal, this is perception. Ether particles and void visualization, this is scent. Light, books, thoughts, seeing. Sound, profits, emotions, energy in motion. Subquarks, acceptance, matter. So sound, hearing. Subquarks, feeling. Movement, subcorp orbitality, solidarity, instinct. Heat, orbital overlap, partisanship, intuition. Attraction, orbital change, faith, inspiration. Movement, heat, attraction is also when you interact with a human being. You could say moving, heating, attracting, or if you are more like German, pulling. Basically, they're the same words in German, pulling and attracting. Sincerity, energy along force work. This is also part of reality. Then periodic table elements, planets, stars, galaxies, black table, supercluster, first seven, wormhole, seven heavens, exotic universal star. And this is the theory of everything, basically. So we have a time component from here and now. This comes from the sixth potential. We have a time scale from smallest to biggest. We have a time scale from biggest to smallest. So in the understanding of the technological high equipped and well defined ancient Arabs, almost say ancient Arabs, so thousands of years before Prophet Muhammad. I always say this Quran is mainly a scientific book about the environment. Even when it talks about society and psychology, it always transgresses back to the development that we can see and describe as universe in nature. it doesn't say nature, environment, and universe, stars. No, it says universe is a different perception from the same thing. You can look at the eye of nature. It's a different perception. The same thing the manifest. And there's another perception which is tradition, and the fourth perception which is what's it called? In German it's called Gewissen, Vicdan of Turkish. So when something bad happens and you feel kind of guilty, or when someone is treated wrong and you help them, and when you did something not so good and you feel terrible, something telling you that's the truth, this thing, this is also these four layers in superposition. So these four layers in composition, sorry, they are four singularities in time domain. These yield separate spaces for time, which cannot have superposition. And if they cannot have superposition under each other, they don't obey any interaction under each other. So you can overlap them, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing this because of the sixth potential. So everything has a definite point in space and time, and its evolution to space is with the parameter time, with the speed and independence in magnitude and direction, and angular momenta and velocities. And this is why time splits up. If you are a human, you're like body, you can say. You have an inner, you have an outer. The inner is the smallest, the outer is the biggest, so to say. But the smallest, this thing in my hand could also be the smallest. It's also really, really big smallness. This could be, if you look at imagination or visualization, like a galaxy through for ether particles. And that's incredible. So we have to be very careful, and the sixth potential lays its work, and I think that's why we are always on the Dirac constant, the sixth potential, so the Dirac number, the Dirac hypothesis or the Dirac theorem, maybe it's also called Dirac Gödel theorem, maybe in the future Dirac Gödel theorem as a side quest for the mathematician field medal, combine Gödel and Dirac number, Dirac hypothesis, and such. If you solve all of this, I've given you the time evolution, I've given you this shit. Everything is in orbitals, so remember subquarks are in orbitals, everything moves in orbitals, because you can have a superposition which maps bijectively if you use orbitals, always orbitals. Like your transversal momentum must also be orbital in your description, in your parameters. If you do that way, you can also describe on top of that a straight line, so it's perfect. But you only get this if you only use circles, so to say, only use epileptics, only use curves to describe movement. Then you can also describe straight movement, or relatively straight movement, or perfectly straight movement. Just also have to have in this crazy creative creator that we have that would do anything for us. He would also make this future appear maybe for a hack to encounter technological weapons from the heavens. So, if you solve this on a mathematical question, then you will get an album, and I will promote you to get the Nobel Prize with a rap album. I'm a rapper. I'm also know physics and philosophy and psychology, and I've also been in arts for so long that have some nice psychological and character skills and characteristics. And yeah, I've wrote some other things. So you can pause the screen and look at it. I mean, it's not much, but talking about makes me happy, and it's so much worth. I don't see the worth of it. Maybe if I put videos on it and do challenges, people will know the worth. And maybe it's meant to be this way because normally people get killed if they get to know such theories, all of that. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Also die China ist der Seinzustand, die Arabischen ist der Islam, Organisationszustand, Iman ist der Akzeptanzzustand. Also, eins von Europa und Amerika, keine Ahnung, was die Überlagerung macht. Normalerweise machst du Überlagerung mit den Teppichen aus Sein. Reflexion und Auflösungszustand aus Islam, also aus dem Arabischen von unten grün und egal. Ich habe so viel gelabert. Or maybe it was just everything in German. So if you solve this theory, I'll make a rap album and promote you to get either a Nobelpreis in physics. If you're a chemist, it can also be a Nobelpreis in chemistry. But based on this theory, I will do it. A Nobel Prize or Fields Medal in mathematics. And if you ask me how to get the Nobel Peace Prize, I can say to you that you would have to cut student debt to zero. The banks will not suffer anything at all. Why? Because the students won't pay them all off tomorrow. But when it's due time to pay, they will have more money to send back. And then, second thing, decrease taxes. So we will have to annex the state taxes. No, jokes aside. So if you want to have the Nobel Prize, come to my new series that I want to make. And in this series, I will talk like Shahid Bolson. But I will also do reverse Shahid Bolson. I will show the good parts of Europe and the bad parts of Islam. Bam. How do you think that? I will also do what Shahid does, so I agree with them. Europe has good parts. Europe has also bad parts. And so does East world. So Turkey, so small Asia, the Arab lands, West Africa is similarly linked to Europe. If you could say continental links, they have the same region of manifestation. So mm, if you want to have the Nobel Prize in peace, I could definitely say stop the war in Gaza, bring Netanyahu to jail, stop the war in Ukraine, stop the war in Taiwan, stop the war in Xinjiang, to China. Now, what would be cool? China would get its Nobel Prize. China should get the Peace Nobel Prize. They should let all Uyghurs free in China. And then they should put it on a live stream on Twitch and such and say, haha, Israel, you are not honest. You cannot do that to your own people. And Israel will stumble upon and lose all their press media. And because China's producing 17 times more steel than Germany, more than USA. This will mean that everything that has been demolished through the